Hi everyone, and welcome to The Sleepy Scientist. I'm really happy you're here. Tonight, we're going to go on a calm and quiet trip to learn something amazing. So get comfy, take a deep breath, and let's enjoy this peaceful science story together. Before we start, tell me in the comments, where are you watching from and what time is it for you right now? If you like relaxing science videos, don't forget to tap the like button. Now let's begin. In the very beginning, the Earth was warm and restless, like a creature dreaming in its sleep. It groaned and shifted under blankets of stone, and from deep within, fire sometimes escaped. The skies were heavy, full of gases that hugged the world close, keeping it warmer than it should have been. And slowly, through the thick and steamy breath of the land, something remarkable began to happen. Tiny creatures moved across the mossy floors and shallow swamps. They were not yet dinosaurs, not yet giants, but they were the quiet prelude. Small, uncertain, with long tails and hopeful eyes, they tiptoed through the tangled green world. They were the ancestors of wonder, the early walkers of a future grand. It was the Triassic time, an age of testing. The world was one single landmass, called Pangaea, stitched together like a jigsaw puzzle no one had taken apart yet. Oceans curled around it. Winds wandered freely. There were no towering mountains yet, no wide deserts, just flat forests and ferns swaying in the heat. And then came the fires. The earth opened up. Volcanic rifts split through the ground like lightning carved in stone. Lava spilled in golden rivers, glowing and slow, covering everything in thick waves of heat. The air filled with ash. The skies darkened for weeks at a time. Great stretches of forest disappeared beneath the flames, and so did many of the creatures who had lived there. But not all. From the smoke and soot the early dinosaurs emerged. They were survivors of the storm, tiny and fast, with sharp senses and clever bones. Some were like little birds without feathers. Others stood upright, like shadows of giants not yet grown. They lived lightly, dodging the fire and finding safety in quiet corners of the world. Their bones were made of secrets, strong, light and hollow, in just the right places, and their hearts beat with a steady rhythm, like the ticking of a clock the world was winding up. The earth, though tired, did not rest. It turned its face to the sun again and the fires cooled. Forests began to return, ferns pushing through the ash like green fingers reaching for the sky. Rain softened the soil and the rivers remembered their paths. And so began the quiet climb of the dinosaurs. In that soft post-fire world they spread, slowly at first, one step, one branch, one new kind at a time. Some grew larger, some learned to run like the wind, some sharpened teeth, others grew beaks. Life began to play with shapes and shadows, as if dreaming up a new collection of living puzzles. Scientists, many millions of years later, would find these puzzles frozen in stone. They would name them with careful Latin words, trace their shapes with fingertips, and wonder how such creatures ever breathed on Earth. But here, in this early hour of their story, the dinosaurs were still finding their breath, still stretching their legs, still learning how to be large, how to be strong, how to dance with the world around them, and the Earth watched them with quiet curiosity. It had seen things rise and fall before, but the dinosaurs were different. They were not just strong, they were persistent. Not just big, they were many. And they were learning to listen to the world, to the seasons, to the silent music of the soil. Night came more gently now, with stars that shimmered like the backs of beetles. The moon sailed over a quieter land, and in the forests the soft steps of small dinosaurs whispered across the ground. The fires had not ended life, they had carved space for it to begin again, and so the earth, still warm beneath its crust, waited and watched. For something incredible was coming, something tall, something fierce, something with teeth like knives and eyes like jewels, but not yet, for now the earth cradled its survivors and let them dream. The fire had passed, the story had begun. Now imagine a forest where the ferns grow taller than a horse, where dragonflies the size of dinner plates glide through thick, warm air. The world has moved into the Jurassic, and the earth has calmed down, for a little while, The land is still one great continent, but it is beginning to pull apart at the seams. Cracks form and new oceans whisper into being. The world is shaping itself for the creatures it carries, like a sculptor smoothing clay. And the dinosaurs, those dreamwalkers from the age of fire, are changing too. They grow longer, stronger, stranger. Their bones stretch into shapes no one had seen before. Some walk on two legs, light and quick. Others, like the long-necked sauropods, rise into the trees with necks like graceful bridges. These sauropods are soft-footed giants. They move in herds like floating islands, their tails swaying like flags in the wind. Each step leaves a story in the mud, a memory pressed into the earth. The world around them hums with life. Volcanoes still puff in the distance, but most days are calm, with golden light dripping through canopies of cycads and conifers. Rivers run wide and slow, lakes collect stories from the sky. The air smells of moss and leaf and wet stone. And in this cradle of warmth, life writes new music. The sky is not empty either. Tiny creatures with wings of skin, the pterosaurs, ride the winds. They are not birds yet, not quite, but they are learning. Gliding, diving, coasting over valleys in search of fish or fruit or a place to perch. Their bones are thin as reeds, and they sleep with one eye open. Some are small as sparrows, others large as gliders. They share the air with insects and clouds and the rising scent of rain. Back on the ground, the meat-eaters are watching. They are the hunters, the stalkers, the teeth in the tall grass. Some are no bigger than a cat. Others are growing larger with claws that shine in the sun. Their names, when we discover them millions of years later, will be hard to say, names like Allosaurus and Ceratosaurus. But here, they are simply the quiet fear between the trees. And yet life is not always fear. Sometimes it is play. Young dinosaurs chase each other through fern gardens, their laughter silent to our ears but loud in the memory of the earth. Mothers build nests in hidden places, curling around their eggs with warm bellies and watchful eyes. They nudge the shells with gentle snouts, waiting for the soft sound of life inside. The world breathes in circles, wet season, dry season, sun and shadow, heat and cool. And the dinosaurs learn to move with these rhythms. The sauropods migrate to find food, their long necks dipping into forest like spoons into soup. The plant-eaters learn to chew with more care. Their teeth grow tougher, like stone polished by use. Evolution is slow but not sleepy. It works with every generation, shaping life like a potter at the wheel. And then, somewhere in the trees, feathers appear. Not all at once, not all birds, just whispers of fluff, little tufts of down on the arms of small two-legged hunters. The feathers are not for flight yet. They are for warmth, for colour, maybe for show. Perhaps they rustle in courtship dances. Perhaps they make these dinosaurs look larger to rivals. We cannot be sure, but we know they are there, fossils pressed into stone like delicate embroidery. Scientists, millions of years later, will lean over these stones in quiet rooms. They will see the shadows of feathers and ancient dust and wonder how they lasted so long. They will imagine the colours, reds, yellows, iridescent blues, though we may never know the truth. Still, the feathers tell us something simple and profound. Birds are not just relatives of dinosaurs. They are dinosaurs. The story of one flows into the other, like water joining rivers. But that part of the story is still far off. Now we are in the golden middle of the age of giants. The earth is warm, wet and full. From Africa to Asia, from the lands that will one day be America to those that will become Antarctica, dinosaurs walk beneath the same sky. They do not know they are everywhere. They do not know they are shaping the future. They are just alive. And so the earth holds them gently. The stars above them shine just the same as ours, though they know no names. The moon pulls at their oceans with the same soft force. Rain falls on their backs, and they blink into it. Thunder rolls over hills that have no cities, no roads, only trees and footprints. Everywhere they go, they leave fossils behind, though they do not know this either. They do not know they will be remembered. But the mud remembers, the riverbeds remember. The bones buried in silence will one day speak again, when picked up by careful hands. Time stretches on, and new shapes rise. Armoured dinosaurs with backs like castles, horned dinosaurs with shields on their heads. Some develop clubs for tails, others rows of plates that catch the sun. Life does not settle, it plays. The earth, though calm, is never still. Beneath the roots and rivers, the planet's crust shifts like deep sleep turning. One day, continents will pull far apart. New climates will appear. The air will change, but not yet. For now, the dinosaurs bloom like a forest of moving stone. They are everywhere, in the valleys, on the hills, across the shores of inland seas. They roar, they eat, they dream. They shape the land just by walking across it. And they do not know they are passing through a golden age. The earth has seen many golden ages, and all of them pass, but this one, the age of the dinosaur, is the most extraordinary yet. So let us stay here a little longer in this warm chapter of the earth's memory and watch them live. Time moved forward like a slow river, carving its story into the stone. The earth, once a single land, had now begun to separate into drifting pieces. What was once Pangaea began to stretch and pull like dough in warm hands, becoming the continents we know today. Oceans widened, climates shifted, and the dinosaurs, still the rulers of this grand world, adapted as best they could. In the Cretaceous period, the final act of their reign began. Life was more diverse than ever before. New species bloomed like wildflowers across the continents. Giant plant-eaters with beaks like shovels munched on blooming coriaceae, the flowering plants. The world had discovered petals and nectar. Bees buzzed through the ferns and fig trees. The sky, no longer ruled only by leathery-winged pterosaurs, now welcomed true birds. Smaller, lighter, feathered with grace. They sang no song we can hear, but they spoke the language of flight. Among the new giants there were names that would one day echo in museums and minds. Triceratops, with its proud crown of horns and frilled shield. Ankylosaurus, low and armoured, a living tank. Hadrosaurs with duck-shaped beaks marching in peaceful herds. And then, the sharpest shadow of them all, Tyrannosaurus rex, a predator so powerful that its very name would be remembered in whispers millions of years later. But even the strongest kings do not rule forever. Far away, across the oceans, something stirred in the darkness of space. A rock, just a rock really, drifting silently between stars. It was not large by the standards of space, perhaps just 6 miles wide, but it had been travelling for a very long time, and it was moving fast. Faster than any wind, faster than sound, faster than the thoughts of the creatures below. And then, one day, it came. The asteroid struck near what is now the Yucatan Peninsula, in a place called Chicxulub. The earth shuddered. The sky lit up brighter than 1,000 suns. Forests ignited. The oceans heaved. Shockwaves circled the globe. Dust and soot rose into the air, high and thick, blocking out the sun. For weeks, then months, the earth sat in darkness. The plants withered. The air grew cold. The food chains, delicate as spider silk, collapsed, and the age of the dinosaurs ended. It did not happen in a moment. Some lived longer than others, some fled to sheltered places, some eggs still hatched, some herds still wandered. But the balance had tipped. Without sunlight, the plants died. Without plants, the plant-eaters starved. And soon after, so did the ones who hunted them. The mighty T-Rex fell to silence, just like the gentle Triceratops. The giants were no more, but not everything died. In the quiet after the storm, some small creatures clung to life. Mammals, no longer hiding beneath the feet of dinosaurs, stepped out into the light. Birds, the feathered descendants of ancient theropods, filled the skies that had once belonged to giants. They chirped in new forests. They built nests on cliffs where dinosaurs once roared. And in time they sang the earth awake again. The bones of the lost ones lay buried, fossilized in silence. But their story did not end. Millions of years passed. Rain carved the mountains, rivers wrote new paths, and eventually humans arrived, curious, small, full of wonder. They walked the earth with eyes wide open, finding shapes in the stone. They picked up pieces of bone, saw the curve of a tooth, the imprint of a claw. They guessed, they named, they imagined. And so the dinosaurs returned, not in body but in thought, in books and drawings, in museums where children pressed their noses to glass, in dreams where giants still walked beneath alien stars. Scientists studied the rocks and found tiny clues, pollen frozen in amber, ash layers whispering of a world-ending flame, the scar of Chicxulub beneath the Gulf of Mexico. They pieced together the puzzle, tenderly, patiently, like sewing together the torn fabric of time. They learned that dinosaurs were not failures, they were not mistakes. They were one of the most successful groups of animals to ever live. For over 60 million years they thrived, in all shapes and sizes. That's more than 700 times longer than humans have existed, and some never really left. Every bird from the pigeon to the penguin carries the story forward. Their bones are light, their hearts are fast, their wings are echoes of ancient arms. The raptor's eye is still there, watching from the branch. So when you hear a bird sing, you're hearing a song that began in the age of dinosaurs. The rise and fall of the dinosaurs was not just a tale of teeth and tails. It was a story of change, of survival, of time so deep it feels like a dream. It teaches us how life can bloom, break, and begin again. Even now, deep beneath the soil, the earth remembers them. It holds their shapes in stone like pressed flowers in a forgotten book. The past is not gone. It's just sleeping. And perhaps in the rustle of leaves, in the shadows of birds in flight, in the thunder of hooves or the hush of wind, you might feel it. The soft heartbeat of a world that once belonged to giants. And you'll know the story lives on. In the quiet valleys of a much older earth, before there were humming cities or paved roads, there walked creatures so large and slow that time itself seemed to bend around them. They were the sauropods, gentle titans with necks that stretched toward the sun and tails that whispered along the forest floor. Their feet sank softly into the soil, their steps like soft drums, beating a rhythm millions of years old. These long-necked dinosaurs were among the largest animals to ever walk the earth. Some grew longer than 3 buses end to end, and heavier than an entire herd of elephants. Names like Apatosaurus, Diplodocus, and Brachiosaurus are the whispers we now use to speak of them, but in their time they needed no names. They were the silent rulers of green kingdoms, moving slowly across plains, wading through rivers, brushing treetops with gentle mouths. They were not monsters, they were not beasts, they were breathing hills, living landscapes in emotion. Their long necks allowed them to reach high into ancient trees, stripping leaves like floating giraffes. Some stood tall like cranes, while others stayed low, sweeping their heads in graceful arcs to harvest ferns and horsetails. Their movements were slow, not from laziness, but from size. Every step took thought. Every turn was a decision. Their lives were not easy, but they were steady. Their enormous size protected them from many dangers. Few predators dared to challenge an adult sauropod. To attack one was to challenge a walking mountain, and yet the world was not without peril. Eggs and young ones were always at risk. Packs of sharp-toothed theropods watched from the shadows, waiting for a misstep. So the sauropods stayed together. They moved in herds like drifting clouds, slow and purposeful. Mothers guarded the young, and the older ones led the way through ancient forests and across wide riverbeds. They remembered paths that stretched across whole continents. Scientists believe they may have followed seasonal trails, returning each year to the same nesting grounds, where they laid dozens of eggs in shallow sandy nests. Their eggs were not as big as you might think, no larger than a soccer ball. Inside, tiny giants curled like dreams in stone. When they hatched, the baby sauropods were small and fragile, and they had to grow quickly. Growth was one of their greatest powers. Some scientists believe they grew faster than any animal alive today, adding hundreds of pounds each year, fueled by forests full of food. And oh, how those forests sang with life. The world in the Jurassic was a warm and breathing place. Conifers towered like green cathedrals. Ferns blanketed the forest floors in thick, velvety carpets. Dragonflies shimmered in the golden light, their wings catching the breeze like glass. Rivers wound like silver threads between the trees, and the sky was full of ancient clouds. The sauropods, with their barrel bodies and pillar legs, left behind footprints as big as bathtubs. Some of these prints remain today, pressed into stone like echoes. Paleontologists, those careful readers of the Earth's diary, have followed these tracks across continents, tracing their gentle arcs through time. Some footprints are so clear you can see the twist of a heel or the slide of a toe. It's as if the sauropod had only just walked by, its scent still lingering in the wind. But how did they carry such weight? How did their hearts pump blood to necks as long as school buses? That is one of the great mysteries of science. Some think their hearts were massive like engines. Others believe they had special valves to keep blood flowing up, defying gravity. Their lungs may have worked like those of birds, pulling air through hollow bones, keeping their bodies light and cool. They were masterpieces of biology, living architecture built by time. We often imagine them as slow and dull, but the more we learn, the more we see intelligence in their design. Their size was not clumsiness, but strategy. Their long necks let them eat without walking. Their herd behaviour protected the young. Their hollow bones made them light enough to grow so large. Every part of them was shaped by survival, and they survived a long time, longer than we can truly understand. Sauropods appeared over 200 million years ago and roamed the Earth for more than 100 million years. That is a time so vast it becomes poetry, hard to hold in the human mind. Think of it like this. If the entire age of dinosaurs was a single day, humans would appear in the final seconds before midnight. And in that long day, the sauropods were the steady breath of morning. They watched the continents drift, the climates change, the skies fill with flying creatures. They saw other dinosaurs rise, fall, and vanish. But they remained, quiet and constant, the sleeping giants beneath the sun. We find their bones now in deserts and cliffsides, where ancient rivers once ran. Their skeletons arch in museums, towering over children with mouths wide in awe. Their necks stretch into ceilings, their tails curl like forgotten question marks. But even the best fossil is only a whisper. The true life of the sauropods is lost in time. We can study their bones, model their muscles, imagine their sounds. But we cannot walk beside them. We cannot feel the ground tremble beneath their feet. We can only listen for their story in the soft rustle of leaves, the slow curl of fog across a meadow, the gentle hush of something large moving through the deep green. And that's enough, because sometimes the best stories are the ones we almost remember, the ones the earth tells us in fragments, one fossil at a time, and in the next breeze, when the leaves stir and the air grows heavy with summer heat, you might hear it, the slow, steady breath of a sauropod dreaming again. Let's drift deeper now into the heart of the sauropod's world, a realm of long afternoons and whispering leaves, of rivers that glimmer under endless sky. By the time the Earth reached the middle of the Jurassic and on into the Cretaceous, the sauropods had become the quiet architects of their environment. Where they walked, forests changed. Where they fed, ecosystems adapted. These giants were not only part of their world, they shaped it with every step. Picture a sauropod herd moving slowly across a wide floodplain. Their feet leave enormous prints in the soft mud, filled later by rain or small animals seeking shelter. Their tails brush the ground in long, sweeping arcs. Their necks sway like slow-moving cranes, weaving through the tops of trees. Each one eats hundreds of pounds of vegetation every day, not just from one plant or two, but from dozens. They crop the tops off conifers. They pull cycads and horsetails from the ground. They strip leaves, gnaw bark, swallow stones to help their bellies grind the food. And in doing so, they act like gardeners of the ancient world. The plants respond. Some evolve new growth patterns, faster regrowth, taller trunks, tougher leaves. Others produce more spores, more seeds, scattering the next generation in the wake of the dinosaurs' feet. The land changes under the sauropod's touch, just as grasslands today grow differently beneath grazing elephants. And all around them, smaller creatures live in the shadows. Tiny mammals scurry through ferns, lizards dart over rocks, insects click and hum, birds, early feathered forms, flit from branch to branch. The sauropods don't chase them, don't notice them, but they are part of the same web. When a branch falls from a tree, everyone hears it. When a sauropod dies, the entire forest changes. Even in death, they are enormous. Their bodies become food for scavengers, shelter for smaller creatures, fertilizer for the forest floor. Beetles bore into bones. Fungi bloom in the wet decay. Over time, their skeletons sink into the earth, buried under layers of mud, then rock. And if the conditions are just right, if there is the right mix of pressure and mineral and time, the bones become stone. Fossils, memory made solid. And that memory reaches us tens of millions of years later. Paleontologists dig with brushes and chisels, their eyes sharp and hands gentle. They lift the past from the ground piece by piece. A vertebra as big as a chair, a femur longer than a man, ribs like the arches of a cathedral, and sometimes footprints, whole trails, where a family of sauropods once walked across a muddy plain and left behind a moment in time. One of the most extraordinary finds was the discovery of Argentinosaurus, a sauropod from what is now South America. It may have reached over 100 feet in length and weighed nearly 100 tons. That is as long as a basketball court and heavier than a full-grown blue whale. Its bones are rare and scattered, but even the fragments tell us of something vast and silent, a creature that once towered above everything else that lived. But size wasn't everything. Some sauropods were smaller, better suited to different environments. On islands, they may have evolved into dwarf forms, shrinking to survive on limited resources. On open plains, others may have grown even longer, their necks stretching like bridges across the land. Evolution, always at work, shaped them like clay, flexible, adaptive, elegant. Their brains were small, but their nervous systems complex. Some scientists believe they may have had a second brain-like bundle of nerves near their hips, helping control the massive length of their tails and legs. Their senses were likely keen, good eyesight, sharp smell, sensitive hearing. They had to be aware of danger, of each other, of the world changing around them. And that world was changing. Slowly, yes, but always. The continents continued to drift. Mountains pushed higher. Sea levels rose and fell. New dinosaurs emerged. Smaller, faster, more specialized. The skies filled with more birds. The forest changed too. Flowering plants or angiosperms began to appear and spread. This was a quiet revolution. No thunder, no fire, just colour. For millions of years, Earth had been green, deep, shadowy green from ferns and conifers. But with the rise of flowers came new shades, reds, yellows, purples, whites. Nectar appeared, and with it bees. Pollination became a dance of precision and perfume. The world smelled sweeter. It's brighter. Did the sauropods notice? Perhaps. Perhaps they brushed past blooming trees with curious eyes. Perhaps they tasted petals between mouthfuls of leaves. Perhaps not. But the flowering plants noticed them. They evolved alongside these giants, changing shape and spread to match the rhythm of their movement. And then came the threats. The Cretaceous was full of danger. The great theropods, the meat-eating giants, had evolved into apex predators. Among them were the Giganotosaurus and Carcharodontosaurus, huge, fast and deadly. Even the mighty sauropods had to be cautious. A sick or young member of the herd was always at risk. The forest rang not just with footsteps, but with the tension of survival. And yet they endured. For over 100 million years, they walked. When the world grew warmer, they moved. When it cooled, they adapted. When land split into islands, they crossed or remained, forming new branches on their family tree. Their story is not one of speed or power or intelligence alone, but of patience, persistence, presence. They lived not in a rush, but in rhythm. And in that slow, steady rhythm they helped build the world we now call ancient. They were the soft thunder of prehistory, the living shadows of the forest. And as they walked beneath the stars still burning above us now, they carried the memory of a time when giants dreamed awake. Their sleep would come later, but not yet. Not in this moment, where the earth is still warm and the rivers still run, and the sauropods move like living hills across the land. Let us walk beside them just a little longer, and remember what it means to live with the land, not just on it. The end of an age often comes not with a roar, but with a hush, a soft shift, barely felt, until the silence spreads like mist. For the sauropods, that end was long in coming, but when it arrived, it swept through the world with quiet finality. These titans had walked the earth for over 100 million years. They had survived fires and floods, shifting continents, and rising seas. But nothing lasts forever, not even mountains that breathe. In the late Cretaceous, the climate had become more unstable. Sea levels rose, turning vast parts of land into shallow seas. The continents had drifted far apart, pulling once connected forests and herds into isolation. Volcanoes erupted in pulses, pumping ash and carbon into the skies. The air was different now, heavier, sometimes cooler, sometimes warming too fast. Life was still abundant, still colourful, but there was a tension in the roots of the world. The sauropods had already begun to dwindle. In many parts of the globe they had disappeared. Only in a few strongholds, South America, parts of Asia, did they remain. The great diversity that once filled the land had thinned like fog under sunlight. New creatures had taken their place. Horned dinosaurs, duck-billed herds, swift raptors with feathers like flames. These were the new faces of the Cretaceous. Still, some sauropods endured. In the southern lands of Gondwana, the titanosaurs rose. They were massive, some of the largest creatures ever to live. Patagotitan, Dreadnoughtus, Saltosaurus, names we have given to ghosts of giants. They bore thick skins, some armoured with bony plates, and walked with the same slow strength their ancestors had carried for eons. But they were among the last. The clock of their age had nearly wound down. And then, as if from outside the story entirely, came the moment that would change everything. A meteor, travelling from the far reaches of the solar system, struck the Earth near what we now call Chicxulub. It came faster than any sound, brighter than any sun, heavier than all the memories of the world combined. When it hit, it carved a crater over 90 miles wide and released energy greater than 1 billion atomic bombs. The impact set off wildfires that raced across forests. Shockwaves flattened everything for hundreds of miles. Earthquakes rang like bell tones through the planet's crust. And then came the dark. Dust and ash blotted out the sun, wrapping the earth in a long, cold night. Photosynthesis stopped. Plants withered. Food chains unravelled. The dinosaurs, already struggling in some places, faced a world turned against them. The sauropods, so large and dependent on constant food, were among the first to suffer. The forests they needed disappeared. The warmth they relied on faded. Even the youngest, swiftest members of their kind could not escape the hunger that followed. Their herds broke apart, their nesting grounds lay silent, and one by one they slipped into the long sleep of extinction. But extinction is not an erasure. It is not forgetting. It is the transformation of presence into memory, of flesh into fossil, of breath into stone. Beneath the ground the sauropods remained. Their bones curled beneath layers of earth, waiting. Some were washed into rivers and buried in silt. Others lay beneath the feet of mammals who scurried and squeaked in the new, quieter world. Over millions of years, minerals soaked into those bones. They turned to stone, fossils, imprints, echoes. And then, much later, humans came. They did not know what they were looking for at first. Just strange shapes in rocks, curious curves and hollows. But they were thinkers, wanderers. They saw patterns, made guesses, shared ideas. Eventually someone gave the bones a name, dinosaur, which means terrible lizard. But it was never quite right. They were not lizards. They were something older, grander, something unique. As the science of paleontology grew, the bones told their story. People found sauropod footprints, teeth, nests. They pieced together spines and legs, imagined the sway of tails, the lift of long necks, museums filled with their skeletons. Artists painted them into jungles, deserts, mountains. Children dreamed of riding on their backs. Filmmakers gave them voices. And slowly, across generations, the sauropods awoke again, not in body, but in mind. Today we look at their fossils with reverence. We study their bones like sacred texts. We wonder how they lived, what they saw, how they breathed. We imagine their eyes, their skin, the sounds of their herds moving across the land. And though we cannot bring them back, we carry them forward. Their story teaches us about patience, about survival, about change, about how the biggest things in life are often the quietest, and yet, in a way, they are still with us. Birds are not just relatives of dinosaurs, they are dinosaurs. Hidden in their bones, their breathing systems, their eggs, their feathers, are the traces of ancient kinship. When a crane stretches its neck above a marsh, when a swan glides across a lake, when a sparrow sings at dawn, a small part of the sauropod lives on. And maybe, just maybe, that's how stories are supposed to end. Not with a period, but with a continuation. The sauropods are sleeping now, their time has passed, but their footsteps remain, their bones remain, and in every museum, in every textbook, in every curious child's wide eyes, they rise again. Giant shadows beneath the sun, sleeping hills that once moved, dreams that left their shape in stone. The long sleep of the sauropods is not a silence. It is a whisper across time, and if you listen, you can still hear them breathing. Beneath the sweeping green canopies of ancient forests, before even the roar of the Tyrannosaurus echoed through the trees, there lived a softer world, a slower, quieter one, humming with life that did not roar or charge or rule from the heights. This was the world beneath the ferns, where the soil was thick with memory and the roots of time wound deep into the dark. Here, in the shadows of tall conifers and under the lacework of giant tree ferns, small creatures moved through dappled light. It was damp and warm, filled with the scent of moss and the hush of ancient breezes. Insects with shimmering wings darted between glowing fungi. Tiny lizards crept across stones that had once been ash, now cooled into permanence. And weaving through this underworld was an ecosystem often overlooked, the secret life of the underbrush. Dinosaurs did not all walk tall. While the sauropods towered above, others crouched low, navigating the jungle floor with sharp eyes and lighter bones. Among them were the early ancestors of the raptors, small bipedal hunters with feathers dusting their limbs and tails that balanced like tightrope poles. They were alert and clever, their senses tuned to every flutter and rustle. They lived in a realm where survival was about precision, not power, where the crunch of a twig could mean the difference between catching a meal and becoming one. These were the dinosaurs that did not dominate the land but slipped through its cracks. They lived in burrows, in nests tucked beneath ferns, in hollows carved by roots and time. The ferns themselves told part of the story. They had existed long before the first dinosaurs, long before birds, mammals, or flowers. Their leaves unfurled like green scrolls, ancient and simple. Their spores drifted through the air like silent messengers. They did not need to be pollinated. They did not seek the help of bees or birds. They reproduced in whispers, in moisture and shade, in the timeless rhythm of water and wind, and the ground beneath the ferns was alive too. Fungi stretched their threads through the soil in vast, unseen webs. Mycelium, nature's quiet network, connected roots, shared nutrients, and passed along chemical messages. Even in ancient times, this hidden conversation took place. Plants speaking in molecules, trees warning one another of danger, roots trading sustenance like coins beneath the surface. Small dinosaurs lived in tune with these rhythms. Some ate insects, some cracked open nuts or dug for tubers. Some watched from the shadows, waiting for the larger predators to pass. They weren't all sharp-toothed or armoured. Some were soft-footed, nimble, curious. Their feathers were not for flight, but for warmth or display, bands of colour that caught the filtered light when the leaves parted. In nests made of twigs and mud, mothers guarded their eggs with quiet devotion. Some even arranged them in circles, like careful stones around a fire. Fossils of these nests still survive, their patterns preserved in rock. They tell us of parenting, of planning, of a love not just instinctual but intentional. These small creatures, long lost to time, once cared for their young in the hush beneath the canopy. And the night in these ancient forests was a thing of wonder. Moonlight dappled the ferns like silver lace. Glowworms shimmered on wet leaves. Owls, early, strange ones, might have fluttered silently through the dark. Even then, in a world ruled by reptiles, the stirrings of the mammal world had begun. Small fur-covered beings with sharp snouts and warm blood crept from their shelters to feed. They were not yet dominant, but they were patient. This forest floor was a place of constant exchange, of giving and taking. Leaf litter fed fungi, fungi fed insects, insects fed lizards, lizards fed birds, and birds with their watchful eyes and delicate claws were part of the bridge between two worlds, the world of the dinosaur and the world yet to come. Some birds may have already begun to hum their strange new songs, calling "Cross the Mist" to others like them. Their bones were light, their feathers shaped for lift, their hearts fast. They hopped along fallen trunks, pecked at seeds, watched the insects crawl. Their minds were sharper than we once believed, their behaviour more complex. They dreamed of flight, even if they didn't fully achieve it yet. Scientists studying the forest floors of the past look not only at bones but at impressions, footprints, leaf prints, the outlines of feathers pressed into volcanic ash that fell like soft snow millions of years ago. These are the whispers the ferns kept for us. These are the secrets the soil has shared, one layer at a time. And then there were the flowers. Yes, even here at the base of trees, among the moss and mushroom, something remarkable was happening. The first flowering plants had begun to bloom. They were small, not yet the colourful blossoms we see today, but they were different. They offered nectar. They drew insects in. They used pollination, an invitation to partnership. They were the earliest signs of the future. The ferns did not vanish, but they now shared their shadowy homes. The underworld became more complex, more colourful, more alive with exchanges of scent and sound. The insects evolved alongside the flowers. The small dinosaurs adapted, learning which blooms held food, which was safe to brush against, which carried warning colours on their petals. The world beneath the ferns was no longer just green and damp. It had become a tapestry, and still the air hummed with quiet. Still the ground held stories in its loam. Still, life flowed in circles too small for the sauropods to see, but too important to be forgotten. So much of history begins in the shadows, in the places few eyes see. The rise of mammals, the persistence of birds, the spread of flowers, all of it began here, in the whispers beneath the ferns. Let us listen more closely. There are still echoes there. Let's wander now more deeply into that hushed green world, where the sun barely pierces the thick canopy and time seems to flow in slow winding streams. This is not the land of thunder lizards or flying shadows above the treetops. This is the realm of stillness and survival, of the small, the subtle, the sacred. Beneath the ferns, life was not loud, but it was wise. The creatures that lived here were often overlooked in stories, not because they were unimportant, but because their stories were written in silence rather than spectacle. They were the caretakers of balance, the ones who kept the soil breathing, the plants spreading, the insects in motion. The undergrowth was a stage of countless invisible plays, and the audience was always the earth. Among these players were the hypsilophodonts, small, swift, herbivorous dinosaurs with big eyes and delicate limbs. They were alert, fast, and clever. Living in groups, they grazed on low plants, plucked fruits with narrow beaks, and darted between trunks when danger stirred. Fossil evidence suggests they were social, perhaps even vocal. They communicated in chirps or squeaks, warning one another of approaching threats. They laid eggs in shallow nests and guarded them in turns, hiding their young among the thickest fronds. In their footsteps came the tiny predators, the compsognathids and troodontids, graceful as dancers, deadly as razors. Some had feathers that shimmered in the light. They stalked quietly, using long toes and narrow jaws to snatch lizards and insects from beneath leaves. Their eyes faced forward, hinting at depth perception and perhaps thought. The forest floor was raucous not only in life but in memory. Fallen leaves layered like pages of a journal. When rain came, the scent of the soil rose in waves, full of age and whisper. Mushrooms bloomed after storms, releasing clouds of spores that sparkled in shafts of light. Some plants had learned to defend themselves with toxins, bitterness, or thorns. Others invited help, forming partnerships with insects or fungi. Nothing was alone, everything was part of something else. Even the roots whispered. Underground, roots and fungi formed networks, what we now call the mycorrhizal web. Plants sent sugars through this web. Fungi delivered minerals and water. Messages travelled in molecules. Warnings about insects, changes in weather, signs of injury. These ancient forests were not just places, they were minds, distributed, collaborative, alive. And somewhere in that complexity, early mammals crept quietly from burrows. Not yet the rulers of the earth, but careful listeners. They were small, no bigger than mice or rats, with sharp senses and warm blood. They curled into mossy nests during the day and emerged at night, when the air was cooler and the predators drowsy. Their fur kept them warm. Their teeth, some sharp, some flat, suggested variety in diet. They could eat insects, seeds, or even small lizards. They were adaptable, they were patient. In a world of giants, they had found the cracks to live in. One such early mammal, Eomaya, left a fossil so complete that it preserved the imprint of fur. Found in ancient Chinese rocks, it offered a glimpse into the softness of the past. A tiny creature with delicate bones. Its presence reminded scientists that not all stories are written in bold strokes. Some are drawn in threads. Insects, too, filled this underworld with motion. Beetles crawled through bark. Ants carved invisible trails. Dragonflies, older than dinosaurs, still darted between puddles and leaves. The air buzzed with their wings. In amber, fossilized tree resin, we have found their bodies perfectly preserved, caught mid-motion in golden sleep. Sometimes we find feathers there too, a whisper and a wing locked together forever in resin's embrace. And in the underbrush, birds were learning their language. They were no longer simply feathered dinosaurs. They had grown lighter, more agile. Their feathers, once for warmth or display, had found new purpose in gliding, then flying. Some birds fluttered from branch to branch, others soared. Their beaks evolved, long, short, curved, sharp. Each one adapted to a food or task. They were learning to sing. We know this because of fossils like Confuciusornis and Archaeopteryx, whose impressions in stone preserve not only bones, but sometimes feather patterns. Their skeletons carry the blueprint of both past and future. In them we see claws on wings, teeth in beaks, a blend of bird and dinosaur. Nature was experimenting, combining, refining. Flight was no longer just the realm of leathery-winged pterosaurs. It was becoming something else, something closer to what we know. And so the forest changed again. With birds came new songs, with flowers came new scents, with mammals came new ways of being. The ecosystem beneath the ferns, once quiet and unchanging, was now layered with complexity. New alliances formed, new challenges appeared. Every creature played its part, but still, the larger world pressed in. As the Cretaceous wore on, the climate shifted. Sea levels rose, some forests drowned, others dried, volcanoes thundered in distant lands. Ash fell like snow in some regions. The balance of life tilted gently at first, then more sharply. But in the undergrowth, life clung on. It always had, it always would. Even as the age of dinosaurs neared its end, the whispers beneath the ferns continued. The roots kept reaching, the fungi kept trading, the mammals kept watching, the birds kept singing, the insects kept humming. These were not the loudest lives, but they were the most enduring. Because survival is not about being the biggest or the strongest. Often it is about being the quietest, the most observant, the most willing to wait. And when the great meteor fell, when the skies darkened and the forest burned, it was the small things, the sleepers, the diggers, the feathered hiders that made it through. Not unscathed but alive. From those nests, those burrows, those fern-shrouded shelters, the future would rise. And so, though the giants fell, the whispers remained. They still do. As the final twilight of the dinosaur age drew closer, the forest floor held onto its breath. Above, larger stories played out. The rise of tyrants, the spread of horned herds, the drift of continents. But below, beneath the heavy green blankets of cycads and tree ferns, the whispers continued. This underworld had always moved at a different rhythm, a slower, more thoughtful pulse, and in those final chapters, it did not hurry. It simply endured. The mammals that had lived in the shadows began to change. Once tiny, once timid, they grew more curious, more capable. Their brains, larger in proportion to their bodies, allowed them to adapt to new situations. They began to explore more niches. Some stayed insectivores, but others nibbled seeds, cracked shells, or hunted smaller creatures in the underbrush. They slept in hidden hollows. They raised their young with warmth. They remembered. And the birds, no longer half dinosaurs but true masters of the air, continued their quiet revolution. Their bones were light, their wings shaped for more than just gliding. They nested in trees and sometimes in caves, shielding their eggs with feathers and song. They fed their young. They built, learned, taught. Even as their cousins, the non-avian dinosaurs, dominated the land, these birds were slipping through time with grace. The undergrowth teemed with new experiments. Some flowering plants developed fruits to tempt animals. Bright colours, sweet flesh, tempting scents. These were new ways to move seeds, to spread life. Birds and mammals responded. They learned what to eat, what to avoid, what to carry away. The forest was becoming a conversation between root and feather, between seed and snout. But change was coming, real change, not just the slow shift of forest shadows. Somewhere in the sky, far beyond the tallest tree, a piece of the universe had already begun its descent. It did not know where it was going, it did not aim, it simply moved, pulled by gravity, lit by speed, shaped by eons of drifting space. It would not arrive for a while, but even so the earth perhaps already knew. And still, beneath the ferns, the world moved as it always had. Insects danced across the moss. Small dinosaurs with feathers like mossy cloaks trotted softly between vines. Mammals dozed with ears twitching at distant sounds. Birds rustled in their nests. Spores floated in beams of filtered sun. Fungi lit the dark with invisible threads. The soil breathed. The meteor struck suddenly, yet the impact echoed through every level of life. It was a soundless flash at first, a moment so bright that even the shadows seemed to retreat. Then came the roar, the heat, the shock. Trees turned to fire. Winds faster than storms flattened everything in their path. In minutes, entire forests were ash. But the danger did not end with the blast. It spread like ink in water. Smoke clouded the sky. Ash fell like snow. The sun disappeared. The air cooled. And everything that depended on warmth and light began to falter. Above ground, the giants struggled. The plant-eaters had no food. The predators found no prey. Nests were left untended. Eggs did not hatch. One by one, the great beasts of the land fell. The skies, once full of soaring forms, fell silent. The age of dinosaurs was ending. And yet, beneath the ferns, in burrows and nests and cracks in the stone, something survived. Not unbroken, but alive. The mammals, small and warm, could wait. They could feed on seeds, on roots, on what was left. The birds, light and clever, found ways to stay hidden, to keep their nests warm. Insects endured as they always had, many in soil, others in wood, some even beneath the surface of lakes. The plants that could survive in low light, the fungi that fed on decay, the ferns that needed only water and shade, all of them remained. The undergrowth, that quiet world, became the cradle of the next age. It would take millions of years for balance to return, for forests to regrow, for warmth to return. But return it did, and when it did, the survivors emerged, not as copies of what had come before, but as something new. The mammals grew, they diversified, they climbed, ran, swam, some developed fingers, others wings, others hooves. Birds flourished, becoming flocks, colonies, songs in every colour. And all of them, every last one, carried a little piece of the whispering world within them. Even today, deep in tropical rainforests, in the cool green shadows, the ferns still grow. Mushrooms still bloom after rain. Insects hum beneath the leaves. Tiny mammals rustle the litter, searching for food. Birds call to each other through the fog, and in that soft, shadowy place the memory of the age that came before remains. It is not fossilized, it is alive. The world beneath the ferns never truly ended. It changed, it listened, it remembered. When we walk through a forest now, we step over the roots of ancient trees, past plants older than our species, across soil built from the bones of time. We hear bird song and might not know it is the voice of a once dinosaur. We brush aside a fern and do not realize it has been there, in some form, since before flowers knew how to bloom. We are not just living after the dinosaurs, we are living among their legacy. And perhaps that's the softest truth of all, the one hidden in moss and mist, in feather and footstep, in shadow and spore. The greatest stories are not always told in roars. Some are whispered beneath the ferns. Long before jet trails painted streaks across the sky or metal wings carved through clouds, the earth looked up to a sky full of dreams. It was not always empty, and it was never still. Even before birds sang, the wind had already become a cradle for flight. And among the earliest creatures to take to the air, there were no feathers, only skin stretched over bone, like sails ready to catch the breath of the sky. This is the story of the pterosaurs, the flying reptiles that ruled the skies long before birds appeared. They were not dinosaurs, though they lived alongside them. They were a different branch of life's great tree, one that reached not toward the ground, but into the wind. Pterosaurs were born of possibility. Their wings were not made of feathers, but of skin, muscle, and bone. Membranes stretched from their elongated fourth finger down to their legs or sides. These wings allowed them to glide, dive, soar. Some were small as sparrows darting through ancient forests. Others, like Quetzalcoatlus, were as tall as a giraffe when standing and had wingspans wider than fighter jets. In the beginning, the sky was their empty ocean. No birds yet flapped above the trees, no bats chirped in the dark. The air was open and the pterosaurs learned to sail it. Fossils show they had hollow bones like birds to reduce weight. Their chests bore strong muscles for flapping. Their heads were filled with long, sometimes toothy beaks, each shape suited to a different meal. Some hunted fish, diving like spears into rivers and lakes. Others caught insects mid-air or picked fruits from branches. They lived on cliffs, on coasts, on forest edges. Wherever there was sky, they found a way to use it. Their eyes were large, adapted to scanning the world below. Their brains were complex, particularly in the regions controlling balance and vision, perfect tools for flight. Some had crests of bone on their heads, tall and colourful, possibly for mating displays or stabilisation in flight. Others bore no crests but glided with sleek precision, like whispers on the wind. But flight is not only about wings, it is about intention. To fly, a creature must know how to fall and how to catch itself. It must know the pull of gravity, the lift of wind, the balance of motion. Pterosaurs knew these things not in thought, but in motion. From the moment they hatched, sometimes even before, they were already reaching for the air. Fossilized nests show evidence of hatchlings with well-developed wings, suggesting that some species could fly soon after birth. And what a sky it was! The world during the Jurassic and Cretaceous was warmer, with fewer ice caps. Sea levels were higher. Islands dotted the oceans like green stepping stones. Forests grew in strange shapes, and insects filled the air with a constant buzzing symphony. It was a place made for gliders and flyers. And so the pterosaurs flourished. They came in many forms. Dimorphodon, with its short wings and large head, flitted through forest canopies like a flying squirrel with teeth. Pterodaustro had bristles in its beak to filter small creatures from water, like a prehistoric flamingo. Rhamphorhynchus had a tail with a diamond-shaped vane, helping it steer like a kite in the breeze. And then there was Pteranodon, one of the most famous, its name meaning winged and toothless. It soared over oceans with long wings and a proud crest, riding air currents for hours without a single flap. Their fossils come from all over the world, in ancient seabeds, in cliffs that were once coastlines, in deserts that were once lush. Some pterosaurs left behind entire skeletons with impressions of their wings preserved, showing the veins and fibres that once held them aloft. In some, we see evidence of fur-like coverings, called pycnofibers, suggesting that they were warm-blooded, with metabolisms like birds or mammals. They weren't cold, sluggish gliders. They were warm, active, responsive. They lived not as passengers in the sky, but as its masters. And still, they changed. Over millions of years, pterosaurs evolved in size, shape and style. Some species shrank to avoid competition. Others grew enormous, pushing the limits of what bone and air could achieve. Some adapted to inland environments. Others became specialists of coastlines, their wings always ready to rise with the morning wind. Their life was not easy. Storms tore through their nesting cliffs. Predators lurked wherever eggs were laid. And even in the air, danger could find them, lightning, sudden gusts, exhaustion. But they learned, as all life does, how to persist. Some lived in colonies, others nested alone, some guarded their young, others laid many eggs and trusted the sky to raise what would survive. Their bones were fragile. That is why we find them less often than other fossils, but when we do, they speak. A single wing bone tells us how far they flew. A tooth tells us what they hunted. A tail tells us how they turned in mid-air. Every fossil is a sentence in their language, and slowly with care science reads that language back into the wind. But just as they once rose, they too would fall. Not suddenly, not all at once, but as the age of dinosaurs drew to its end, the pterosaurs began to fade. Their numbers thinned, their diversity shrank, and as the meteor fell and fire swept the world, most of them vanished. Only birds would carry flight forward. Still, the pterosaurs were the first to write in sky. They were the ones who taught the earth how to rise, long before engines, long before feathers. There was a wing, a gust, and a dream. The sky remembers. Let us drift now into the middle of the sky's long memory, where the wind carried not just wings but whole stories. As the world turned and the pterosaurs ruled the air, something quiet and remarkable began to unfold beneath them. In the shadows of forests, on the branches of strange trees, and across the feather-strewn ground, another kind of flight was being born, not of skin, but of plume. Not of gliding alone, but of something deeper, more rhythmic, more permanent. The age of birds had begun. They came softly at first, not with great size or power, but with lightness. Small creatures descended from theropod dinosaurs, the same lineage that once produced the sharp-toothed hunters of the land, began to stretch their arms in new ways. These arms had claws, yes, but they also had feathers. Feathers are among the most delicate things ever preserved in stone, and yet they carry a strength few other adaptations can match. Their origins stretch far back, even before flight. First, they may have been used for warmth, soft, downy tufts keeping hatchlings safe through cool nights. Then for display, bright plumes raised to impress, to court, to warn. and slowly through countless generations, feathers found the sky. The fossil record speaks in fragments, but it speaks clearly. In a limestone quarry in Germany, the imprint of a single creature changed everything. Its name, Archaeopteryx. Preserved in fine sediment, it was a bridge between worlds. It had wings like a bird, teeth like a reptile, claws on its hands, and a long bony tail. It could not soar like a falcon, but it could flap, glide, leap from branch to branch. It was not the first bird, but it was among the earliest we know, and it told us that flight had taken root in bone. From these early avians came a bloom of variety. Some had long tail feathers, others kept claws on their wings, some had beaks, others still had teeth. They nested, brooded, preened. In the Cretaceous forests, birds were already singing songs of survival. Fossils from China reveal exquisite details. Feathered bodies posed in final sleep, their wings folded like the petals of flowers after a storm. These birds hunted insects, nibbled seeds, and danced in the wind just as they do today. Flight in birds is not merely an extension of movement, it is an orchestra of adaptation. Hollow bones to reduce weight, a keeled breastbone for powerful flight muscles, air sacs to keep lungs full, circulating oxygen even as wings beat, sharp eyesight for navigating trees, avoiding predators, finding food. And always feathers, layered, flexible, self-repairing miracles of structure. But what sets birds apart is not just their bodies, it is their minds. Even among dinosaurs, the ancestors of birds showed signs of complex behaviour. Some guarded their nests with care, others built communal rookeries. The early birds inherited these traits and refined them. Nest building became an art. Some lined their homes with feathers or leaves, others hid their eggs deep within hollows. Parents fed their young, taught them to fly, protected them from storms. The sky was no longer only a place to escape to, it became a home. Pterosaurs had ruled the skies for millions of years, but birds brought something new. Their smaller size allowed them to live in tighter spaces, to nest in trees, to survive on scraps and seeds. When changes came, climate shifts, new predators, shrinking forests, birds adapted faster. They were not stronger, but they were more flexible. And they began to sing. The earliest bird songs were likely simple calls, perhaps whistles or clicks, but even those were profound. For the first time in Earth's history, the sky had a voice. It echoed over rivers, through canyons, across open fields. These sounds were used to claim space, to attract mates, to warn of danger. Over time, they became more intricate. Songs with rhythm, with phrasing, with patterns passed down from parent to child. Flight had become not just a way to move, but a way to express. Still, the birds and the pterosaurs coexisted for a time. They shared the sky, sometimes avoiding each other, sometimes competing. Fossil sites show their bones side by side, their wings etched into the same layers of stone. But slowly the balance shifted. As birds diversified, pterosaurs declined. Perhaps it was competition. Perhaps it was environmental change. Perhaps both. The smaller pterosaurs were the first to vanish, their roles taken by birds. Only the great giants remained, and even they, in time, would fade. And yet the air grew richer. Birds had brought something the sky had never truly known before: memory. Many could return to the same nests year after year. They could remember routes across continents. Some began to migrate with the seasons, using the sun, stars, and magnetic fields to guide their way. They danced with time itself, flying not just through air, but across the map of the year. Imagine a flock of ancient birds rising from a fern-lined lake, their wings catching the golden morning light. They call to each other, adjusting their flight. Some skim the water's surface, others circle upward. In their eyes glint intelligence, in their muscles, flight refined by millions of years. Their feathers shimmer in greens and golds. The air around them vibrates not with noise but with purpose, and beneath them the world listens. Flight by then had become a song written across the sky. Even now we see their legacy. Every sparrow on a wire, every gull over the sea, every hawk riding the thermals, they carry the story forward. They are the great-grandchildren of that first bold leap into the wind, and within them lives the memory of a world before mammals ruled, before flowers bloomed in full colour, before humans built wings of steel. In birds the past is alive, their hearts beat fast, their lungs hum with ancient rhythm, their bones are echoes of dinosaurs, their feathers are threads woven through time, and as they rise, alone or in flocks, they do not just fly, they remember. The wind does not hold on to names, it carries wings, carries sound, carries stories, but it forgets, and yet the memory of flight lingers in the sky. Every current, every updraft, every still moment above the trees is a canvas for something ancient. For what was born in the age of the dinosaurs did not perish with them. It drifted onward, feather by feather, breath by breath. In the last chapters of the Mesozoic era, the sky was still shared. Pterosaurs glided in the thermals above warm oceans, and birds flitted through dense forests, hopping between branches and singing to the wind. But below, on the ground, something dark had begun to stir, deep in the earth, quiet at first, then growing. When the asteroid struck the Earth 66 million years ago, it changed more than the land. It changed the air. The explosion sent fire and dust into the sky, blotting out the sun for weeks, then months. The skies turned cold, the air turned dark, plants died, insects died, and then, slowly, everything that depended on them began to fall. The great pterosaurs, already fewer in number, could not survive the hunger that followed. Their eggs laid on open beaches or cliffsides were exposed. Their size, once their strength, became a weakness in a world with no food, no warmth. One by one they vanished. They left no descendants. Their lineage ended there in the long shadow of the falling star. But some birds remained. It is hard to say why. Perhaps they were smaller, needing less food. Perhaps they could eat seeds, or insects hidden in bark. Perhaps their nests were better hidden, their bodies better insulated. Some scientists believe that ground-dwelling birds had the best chance, those that did not rely on trees now charred or gone. Others point to diet, to diversity, to luck. We may never know for sure, but we know they made it. From those survivors, all the birds of today descend. Not just the eagles and parrots, but the pigeons, the robins, the chickens in fields and the owls in barns. The flamingos in shallow lakes, the penguins on icy shores. All of them carry the blueprint of ancient wings, and they brought flight forward into a new world. As the earth healed, as green returned to grey, birds took to the sky once more, not as relics of the past, but as pioneers of the future. They explored every habitat. Some stayed close to the ground, scratching in leaves. Others soared high above the mountains. Some learned to swim, turning wings into flippers. Others ran fast and strong, their wings used not to fly, but to balance. Evolution took its palette and painted with joy. In time, birds became part of every ecosystem. They pollinated flowers. They scattered seeds. They kept insect populations in balance. They became food for others, companions for some, inspiration for many. They sang across canyons, perched on temples, flew alongside storms. Their songs became complex, some mimicked other sounds, some formed regional dialects. Birds passed songs from parent to child like stories. They remembered migration routes without maps. They returned to the same trees across generations. Their hearts beat fast. Their bones stayed hollow. Their feathers layered in patterns so intricate no machine has yet matched them. Even now, science continues to uncover secrets hidden in feathers. The colours we see are often more than just pigment. They are the result of light refracting through microscopic structures. That iridescent shimmer on a hummingbird's throat, that flash of blue on a jay's wing, is light dancing with biology. It is beauty created by structure, not just colour. A song, not only heard in sound but seen in motion. In laboratories, researchers study bird brains, fascinated by their complexity. The brains of some species, like crows and parrots, rival those of primates. They solve puzzles, use tools, recognize themselves in mirrors. They mourn, they remember faces, they plan, and they fly. In flight, birds find more than escape. They find rhythm. A hummingbird beats its wings more than 50 times per second. A swift may sleep while gliding, never touching ground for months. A bar-tailed godwit can fly more than 7,000 miles without stopping. They are not bound by borders. They know the earth from above, as few others do. To fly is to see without being seen, to rise without leaving, to move without disturbing. It is one of life's greatest transformations, an act of balance, of power, of grace, and birds carry that gift as naturally as breath. We see them and often forget their ancestry, but inside every feather is a fossil's echo. Inside every heartbeat is the rhythm of something ancient. The next time you watch a bird rise, know that you are watching time take flight. A pigeon on a rooftop, a crane crossing the sunset, a sparrow on a windowsill. These are not simple creatures. They are the sky remembering. And what they remind us is this. The age of dinosaurs did not end. It evolved. It narrowed, adapted, soared. So when you hear birds in the morning, when you watch them spiral through sky, know this. They are not just part of nature. They are what remains of a dream older than mountains. The sky, once empty, learned to fly, and it never forgot how. Beneath the layers of soil and stone, deeper than roots, deeper than rivers, lie the silent storytellers of Earth's long memory. Bones turn to stone, time turned to shape. These are the fossils, the ancient remains of creatures long gone, preserved not in motion but in stillness. They are not only reminders of the past, they are clocks, bone clocks, marking the rhythm of life through ages we cannot see. Each fossil holds a moment, frozen by chance. A bone buried in soft sediment, untouched by scavengers, shielded from time's decay. A footprint filled with rain, then silt, then stone. A feather caught in ash. A nest of eggs buried by a sudden flood. These moments preserved become pages in Earth's deep journal, written not in ink but in mineral. When we look at a fossil, we do not just see bone, we see transformation. The soft tissues have vanished, but the hard parts remain, turned to rock, but still shaped like life. Minerals seep in over centuries, replacing the cells with crystals. Calcium becomes quartz, bone becomes sculpture, but the form remains true. A rib still curves like breath, a tooth still bears the edge of hunger, a claw still points to movement. The process is slow, and it is rare. For every million creatures that lived, only a handful become fossils. The Earth does not preserve everything. It selects with silence, with chance. That is why each fossil matters, not because it shows us everything, but because it shows us anything at all. Paleontologists are the readers of this stone script. With brushes, chisels, and endless patience, they reveal what the Earth has hidden. A jawbone in a cliff, a vertebra in a desert, a trail of footprints crossing an ancient floodplain. They study the strata, the layers of rock, each one a page in time's great book. The lower the layer, the older the story. In places like Montana, Patagonia, the Gobi Desert, and the limestone beds of Europe, fossils lie in quiet clusters, waiting. Some have been waiting for tens of millions of years. They are not in a hurry. Time has already moved around them. And what they tell us is more than just what existed. They tell us when, where, how. Through fossils, we learn of ancient climates, once warm poles, forests where now there is tundra, deserts that were once seas. A fish fossil in the Sahara speaks of lost oceans, a palm leaf in Alaska whispers of warmth. Each fossil is a clock with no hands, but all of them tick together. Scientists have learned to read these clocks with precision. Radiometric dating uses the decay of elements like uranium and potassium to determine the age of rocks around the fossils. Carbon dating, though only useful for younger remains, helps with more recent chapters. Layer by layer, atom by atom, we piece together the chronology of Earth's unfolding. And among all the fossils we find, dinosaur bones speak with a particular depth. Not just because they are old, but because they are familiar. Their shapes are echoed in birds, in reptiles, even in us. The socket of a hip, the curve of a shoulder, the spine's long, patient coil. We see ourselves reflected, even in those giants. Some fossils show growth rings inside bones, much like trees. They tell us how fast the creature grew when it stopped growing, whether it lived through seasons of hunger or abundance. In a single bone there is a lifetime. In a skeleton there is a family. In a fossil bed there is a world. The Hell Creek Formation in North America is one such world. Stretching through time to the very end of the Cretaceous period, it holds the last whispers of the dinosaurs. There we find Tyrannosaurus rex, Triceratops, Edmontosaurus, and many more. Creatures who lived just before the Great Extinction. Their bones lie near a thin, dark layer of clay rich in iridium, a rare element more common in asteroids than in Earth's crust. That layer marks the boundary. Above it, birds and mammals. Below it, the last of the giants. The fossils do not just speak of life, they speak of death too, of injury, of disease. We have found bones with tumours, infections, healed fractures, a tyrannosaur with a bitten tail, a hadrosaur with a limp, a protoceratops locked in combat with a velociraptor, both preserved mid-fight by a sudden collapse of sand. These are stories not of extinction, but of existence. Even dinosaur nests have been found. Circles of eggs, some broken open, some still full. In some, tiny bones remain curled like secrets. We know from these that some dinosaurs cared for their young, that parenting did not begin with mammals, that nurture is older than we thought. Fossils also record moments of change, transitional species caught in the act of becoming. Dinosaurs with feathers, fish with limb-like fins, mammals with reptilian jaws. These are the bridges in the fossil record, crossing gaps not with leaps but with careful steps. Evolution writes in bone, but even as we uncover more fossils, we are always surrounded by mystery. For every question answered, 10 more rise. What colours were their scales? How did they sound? Did they play? Did they dream? We do not know, we may never know, but in the presence of their bones we are allowed to wonder. Because the bones are clocks, they tick in silence, in stone. They count not hours but epochs, and they remind us of what has passed and what may come again. We walk upon layers of time. Beneath our feet are the footprints of giants. Above our heads fly their descendants. Around us grow forests that have seen it all. The earth remembers, and in the stone the bones still whisper, still count, still wait. Let us walk farther into the silence of stone and time. Fossils, though quiet and still, are not lifeless. They are messages, frozen letters from a past so ancient it feels like a dream. Their language is not one of sound, but of form, of placement, of mineral and memory. Each one is a puzzle that fits into a greater picture, a piece of Earth's long conversation with itself. And in their company, we do not just learn what came before, we begin to understand what it means to endure. Fossils teach us that life is not a straight line. It is a branching tree, ever changing, twisting, reaching. Each fossil is a branch we can see clearly, a place where time touched down and left a record. Some branches end, others continue, and some, remarkably, curve back toward us. Among the most striking discoveries in recent years is the understanding that birds did not simply descend from dinosaurs. They are dinosaurs. Not cousins, not echoes. They are the living continuation of a once dominant group. When we study fossilized dinosaurs with feathers, species like Microraptor, Anchiornis, or Sinosauropteryx, we are seeing the soft early sketches of the creatures that now sing in our trees and soar above our heads. The transition from scale to feather, from earth to sky, was not a leap, but a layering of changes, one fossil at a time. The details preserved in some fossils are breathtaking. In fine-grained stone we find impressions of feathers, even pigment cells that hint at original colours. One dinosaur, Sinosauropteryx, appears to have had a striped tail, perhaps for display or camouflage. Another, Caudipteryx, bore symmetrical feathers, not suited for flight but perfect for insulation or show. Evolution experiments constantly. These fossils are snapshots of its curiosity. Other fossils tell quieter tales. A group of protoceratops found together, perhaps a family. A cluster of Psittacosaurus juveniles huddled around an adult skeleton, suggesting parenting, protection, social bonds. We think of dinosaurs as solitary or savage, but the bones sometimes tell a gentler story. They show patterns of life, groupings, habits, care. Fossils are not just about dinosaurs, of course. They also preserve entire ecosystems. In the same rock layers that hold bones, we find fossilized plants, insects, shells, spores. We can reconstruct forests, rivers, coastlines. We know which creatures lived together, what they ate, how they moved. A fern fossil near a dinosaur nest tells us what the parents may have brought for cover. A fish's scales in a theropod's belly reveal a diet of freshwater hunting. These are the background details that bring the stage to life. And in the bones themselves, there is time. Not just how long ago the creature lived, but how long it lived. Microscopic slices of bone reveal growth rings, much like trees. Fast-growing species show wide rings. Stunted years, caused by drought, scarcity, or illness, leave narrow ones. Some dinosaurs grew to full size in less than a decade. Others, like the giant sauropods, grew steadily for decades. Their bones carry those years within them, a quiet count of seasons and struggle. The technology we use to study fossils continues to evolve. CT scans let scientists peer inside skulls without damaging them. 3D imaging allows us to reconstruct skeletons from crushed remains. Particle accelerators can detect trace elements in fossils, residues of ancient blood, bone marrow, even possible soft tissue structures. With these tools, the fossils begin to speak louder, with more detail, more nuance. Some of the most astonishing findings come from amber, fossilized tree resin. Trapped within it, we find moments caught in golden stillness. A feather, a lizard, an insect mid-flight. In 2016, scientists discovered a piece of amber containing part of a feathered dinosaur tail, complete with bones, muscles, and soft plumage. It was a glimpse into a moment more than 99 million years ago, a window so clear it felt like time itself had bent, and fossils remind us of endings too. Extinction is written in stone. Across the world, paleontologists find the same dark layer of rock, rich in iridium, marking the boundary between the Cretaceous and Paleogene periods. Below it, dinosaurs. Above it, mammals. The fossils near this boundary are charred, scattered, abrupt. They speak of a world undone in days, of fire, of ash, of silence, but they also speak of survival. In the bones of small birds, of tiny mammals, of reptiles and amphibians, we see resilience. These creatures, whose fossils lie just above the line, carried life forward. They are the bridge to us. We too are part of this fossil story. Our own bones, should they one day be buried, may turn to stone. Our footprints in dried mud may someday be discovered, studied, wondered over. We build museums filled with the fossilized remains, but we also carry fossils within us, ancestral traits, shared structures, echoes in our DNA. There is a kind of poetry in this, that the stone bones of long-dead creatures tell us not only what they were, but what we are. Fossils teach us to look back, yes, but they also ask us to look forward. What will remain of us? What will others find millions of years from now, buried beneath cities or forests or oceans? Will they know what we cared about, what we feared, what we loved? In every fossil we hold, we are reminded of time's quiet patience, of the beauty in what endures, of the stories that survive the silence. The bone clocks tick on, and we, for a moment, are allowed to listen. Let us now bring the story of the bones to rest, not in silence, but in reflection. Because even though the bones no longer breathe, they have not stopped speaking. They continue to shape the way we see the world, the way we understand life and loss, and the way we trace our own place in time. They are the clocks that never tick, yet always count. And in their presence, we are reminded that we too are part of this ancient unfolding. The fossils lie beneath our feet and above our eyes, in museum halls where children stare up in wonder at towering skeletons. There, the long arcs of spines stretch like bridges to the past. The jaws gape wide in frozen roar. Though they no longer bite, the claws curve toward nothing but still suggest motion. The tail extends behind them, a counterbalance to a life that once moved through forests we will never see. And in these rooms, quiet as they often are, there is always one question. What was it like? To imagine a world built from bones is to imagine a world built from mystery. Every fossil is both an answer and a question. What did it eat? Where did it sleep? How did it see the world? Did it feel fear, joy, pain? We do not know, but we stand beside their remains and wonder. And that wondering is as important as the knowledge itself. Fossils shape the dreams of the curious. They inspire artists to paint skin over skeletons, to colour scales and feathers, to imagine the flash of light on a hunting eye or the tremble of leaves under a passing foot. They push engineers and biologists to ask new questions about movement, structure, survival. They make poets write of things older than words. And they remind philosophers that time is not only a line but a spiral, returning again and again to the same truths in different forms, and they connect us. A fossil found in South America might mirror one from Mongolia. Bones scattered on separate continents tell a single story of a world once whole. The fossil record shows us the movement of continents, the rise of mountains, the deep breath of earth through heat and ice. It tells us that everything changes, and yet the shapes remain. The curve of a rib is echoed in every chest. The hollow of a skull is reflected in our own. The joint of a knee, the hinge of a jaw, the pattern of vertebrae. We are made of the same architecture. Not exactly, but closely enough to feel it. Closely enough to recognize ourselves dimly in creatures from millions of years ago. And sometimes the bones bring surprises. A fossil may be uncovered with soft tissue still intact, blood vessels turn to iron-rich minerals, or a whisper of protein within a marrow cavity. In the right conditions, the impossible becomes possible, and science leans close, breath held, listening. Because these are the parts that could one day answer the softest questions. What did they smell like? What did they sound like when they called across the swamps? What colour were their eyes? Each discovery widens the circle. It invites more voices into the conversation. Not just scientists, but artists, teachers, children. Fossils belong to everyone, because they come from everything. They are the shared language of time, and time, the one constant beneath all stories, is shaped by these stones. It bends around their age. We measure eras by extinctions and appearances, by when the ammonites vanished, when the trilobites thrived, when the dinosaurs rose and fell. We date the rocks by the bones within them. The layers stack up like pages in a book, each one written in pressure and ash and sediment. And in reading them, we write our own understanding. Even now, more fossils are being uncovered. In fields, in cliffsides, in riverbeds. With drones and lasers and satellite imaging, we peer beneath the surface, searching for what the Earth has chosen to keep. Some lie so close to the surface they can be uncovered by a summer rain. Others rest deep within mountains, waiting for centuries to pass before light finds them again. But they are there. The bone clocks keep counting even if we're not listening. And when we do listen, we find something unexpected. Not just the story of other creatures, but the story of ourselves. Because to understand the past is not only to see what has come before, it is to understand how we came to be and where we are going. Our bones too tell stories. In 100,000 years, perhaps someone will find a fossilized rib, a tooth, a femur. Perhaps they will ask the same questions we do. Perhaps they will wonder what we feared, how we lived, what we dreamed, and perhaps as they study the curve of our bones, they will understand a little more about their own. We are not separate from the fossil record, we are part of it. The Earth has always been a keeper of memory. Stone remembers what we forget, and fossils are its deepest memories, silent but never lost. So the next time you pass a stone on a trail or see a bird in flight or run your fingers over the bones in your wrist, remember, time moves slowly, but it moves. Life rises, falls, returns. And in the end, all stories leave a trace. The bone clocks keep ticking, and the earth, ever patient, keeps listening. The ocean, wide and ancient, has always held the memory of the earth's deepest silences. Long before it knew the touch of ships or the hum of submarines, it had already witnessed the rising and falling of continents, the birth of mountains, the drift of islands. And within its waters it carried the ashes of a world undone, a veil of soot and sorrow that fell quietly after the sky itself had shattered. It began with a light, but not the gentle kind that warms the leaves or sparkles on waves. It was a flash brighter than 1,000 suns, a roar without warning, a scream from space that ended in fire. When the asteroid struck Earth near what we now call the Yucatan Peninsula, it left a wound in the planet deeper than any canyon. The force was greater than anything life had known. For a moment, the Earth burned from the inside out, and then the sky began to fall. Ash rained down like black snow, covering forests, choking rivers, settling over oceans. Winds carried it far beyond the crater, across continents, over mountains, through valleys. It fell into lakes and seas, into the mouths of rivers, onto the backs of waves. It did not stop for days, and in the oceans it did not disappear. It sank slowly like memory itself, drifting into the deep. There, in the quiet places where light cannot reach, the ashes came to rest. They formed a layer that still lies in the ocean floor today, a dark band of clay rich in iridium, a metal rare on Earth but common in asteroids. Scientists call this the KPG boundary. Above it, life as we know it. Below it, the last breath of the dinosaurs. But in that moment, the world was not science, it was survival. The impact sent waves, tsunamis taller than buildings, racing outward from the site. They crashed into coasts, swallowed islands, tore coral reefs from stone. They swept over nests and burrows, erased coastlines, drowned what had stood for ages. Fish, reptiles, ammonites, plankton, all felt the shift. The ocean trembled from surface to trench, and then came the cold. With the sky blocked by dust and smoke, sunlight failed. Temperatures dropped. Photosynthesis slowed, then stopped. In the ocean, the microscopic plants, phytoplankton, that fed the smallest fish and the greatest whale's ancestors died in silence, and with them so many others. The chain of life, delicate and invisible, began to break. The ammonites, coiled and curious, had ruled the seas for millions of years. With their spiral shells and floating forms, they had watched the rise of dinosaurs, the drift of Pangaea, the spread of coral kingdoms. But they were sensitive to change. When the food disappeared, they followed. Their fossils, once found in every corner of the world, end at the same line. So do the great marine reptiles. The mosasaurs, serpentine and strong, who had glided through the water with jaws wide and eyes sharp, vanished. The plesiosaurs with their long necks and smooth strokes were gone. The ichthyosaurs, already fading before the impact, disappeared for good. The oceans, once vibrant with predators and prey, grew still, but not empty, for while the giants fell, the small remained. Just as in the forests and skies, survival favoured the unnoticed. Tiny fish, simple-shelled creatures, resilient microbes, they endured. Some floated through the ash, feeding on what little remained. Others burrowed into sediment, waiting for light to return. The ocean did not die. It held its breath. And then, after months, perhaps years, the sun returned. Light filtered through the grey, warming the surface. Slowly the plankton returned, blooming in pulses. The water turned green with new life, and with that life the ocean exhaled. Fish swam again in schools, coral found footing, shells turned with the tide. It was not the same as before. The world had changed, but it was not over. The ashes remained, settled deep below. As layers of sediment pressed down over millennia, they became rock, and inside that rock we find the stories. A thin band of iridium-bearing clay in ocean cores matched around the globe, a line in time found in Italy, Denmark, New Zealand, North America, the ocean floor. The same layer, the same moment, a shared breath held across the earth. And in that breath we see the fragility of life, not its weakness, but its delicacy. Life is strong, but it is also tender. It responds to the slightest shift in light, in temperature, in balance. One event, one stone from the sky, was enough to unweave an entire world. But we also see its resilience. Within 100,000 years, life had rebounded, not just returned, but changed, evolved. New species rose, new predators hunted, new shapes filled the seas. The ocean did not forget, but it did not stop. It became something new, and deep within its heart the ashes still rest. Not as a wound, but as a memory, a reminder, a line that says, this was the end of one world and the beginning of another. When we study the ocean floor, when we pull cores from deep beneath the waves and see that dark stripe, we are touching that moment. The end of the dinosaurs, the fire, the dark, the long, slow breath of healing. We are reminded that the earth does not hold grudges, it holds records, and in those records we find the truth that everything beautiful can be lost, but also that from the ashes, life always begins again. In the gentle hush that followed the fire, the ocean waited. Its surface cooled beneath dim skies, its current slowed beneath the weight of silence. Where once shoals of fish had darted like silver ribbons, and reptiles had cruised with long jaws open, there was now only quiet. A world that had once shimmered with life had gone pale, its colours dimmed by the ash that floated above and the cold that seeped below. But the ocean, ancient and watchful, had known loss before. Over billions of years it had witnessed the rise and fall of microscopic empires, coral kingdoms and drifting forests of algae. It had swallowed continents and opened trenches that could hide whole mountains, and now, in the dark days after the asteroid, it held tightly to the smallest traces of life. Not with desperation, but with patience. Far below the waves, in the deepest parts where the light had never reached, hydrothermal vents still breathed warmth into the water. Around these vents lived strange creatures, tube worms with no eyes, shrimp with glowing backs, crabs covered in bristles. These beings did not rely on sunlight. They fed on minerals, on chemical reactions, on the slow churning heat of the Earth's core. They were unaffected by the sky's grief. In their world, the dark was normal, and so life endured there, quiet and unseen. Elsewhere, near the surface, the survivors gathered. Tiny plankton, nearly invisible, began to return. These microscopic plants had once painted the oceans with green and gold. They had fed nearly everything, and now, inch by inch, they returned. Their revival was slow, each bloom a whisper of hope. But they came back, and as they did, so too did those who fed upon them. Zooplankton, the drifting grazers, then the small fish, then the hunters. The oceans became a theatre of return. The script had changed, but the play continued. Where ammonites had once floated in their spiraled shells, their absence opened space. New cephalopods evolved, squids and octopuses more like those we know today. Their intelligence grew in silence. They learned to change colour, to shapeshift, to vanish into coral and shadow. They became the silent thinkers of the sea, curious and quick, watching from the cracks in the reef. Sharks too survived. Their bodies, honed over hundreds of millions of years, were built for endurance. Some species perished, but others slipped through the boundary like shadows. In the darkened seas, their senses served them well. They could detect the smallest shifts in electric fields, the faintest heartbeat in the water. They needed little light. They needed only time, and the ocean gave it to them. Bony fish emerged stronger as well. Some developed armor like scales. Others grew faster, bred quicker, adapted to changing temperatures. The coral reefs, once devastated by acid rains and darkness, began to rebuild. Tiny coral polyps, cousins to jellyfish, started new colonies on bare stone. Slowly they built their skeletons upward, catching sunlight as it returned, and with them came new reefs, new homes for new life. One of the most remarkable transformations was in the microscopic world. The ocean's surface shimmered again with diatoms and coccolithophores, plankton with shells made of glass and chalk. These organisms were more than just food. They became engines of oxygen, capturing carbon, shaping the chemistry of the atmosphere. Their shells, when they died, rained down to the sea floor, creating layers of sediment that would one day become chalk cliffs and limestone beds. These shells, stacked one over the other, recorded the healing of the world. Each layer spoke of recovery. Each band of sediment told of species returning, diversifying, spreading. The ocean, once cloaked in grief, was learning to breathe again. And as life rebounded, it changed. New species filled the gaps left behind. The survivors evolved. From small fish came bigger predators. From drifting invertebrates came complex forms. The food webs tangled once more, and the dance of predator and prey resumed. The silence lifted. It was not the same ocean as before. The mosasaurs, plesiosaurs, and ichthyosaurs were gone. The ammonites were gone. The ancient reefs, the coral forests, the delicate partnerships between certain fish and certain plants, all gone. But the ocean was still alive, and that was enough. Over time the mammals came. From the land some animals returned to the sea. They were not reptiles. They were warm-blooded, air-breathing, fur-covered, but the sea welcomed them just the same. Early ancestors of whales slipped into coastal waters, their limbs slowly turning into flippers. Their nostrils crept up their skulls to become blowholes. Their bones became denser to help them sink. Over millions of years, they would become the great singers of the sea, trading forests for currents and legs for tails. Seals and sea lions followed, and later manatees and dugongs. The mammals had returned to the water not as visitors but as new citizens, and the ocean, ever open, made space for them. Birds too joined the waves. Descended from dinosaurs, they skimmed the surface, dove for fish, nested on cliffs above crashing surf. Penguins gave up flight for flippers. Pelicans, cormorants, albatrosses all took their place in the seascape. The boundary between air and water blurred, and through it all, the ashes remained. They were now buried beneath layers of silt and shell pressed into stone. But they were not forgotten. They were the line drawn across Earth's memory, the soft mark of an ending that had given way to beginning. When scientists today extract sediment cores from the deep sea, they can still find the thin, dark layer of iridium-rich clay, a fingerprint of disaster, a marker of change, a promise that even in loss, life finds a way forward. And in that promise there is a kind of peace. The ocean does not hold on to grief. It moves, it swells, it breathes, it remembers, but it does not stop. Its tides are not a circle, but a spiral, always moving, always returning, never the same. And so from the ashes, the ocean made a new world. Not perfect, not painless, but possible. The ocean, though vast and unpredictable, still holds ancient memories. As we dive deeper, we learn that it is not merely a body of water, but a living archive, a reservoir of life's history, preserved in the stillness of its depths. Its currents carry more than salt and plankton. They carry stories of worlds that existed long before us. These stories are etched in the bones of creatures that lived and died, their remains becoming part of the seafloor, a steady rhythm of life and death that continues to this day. For as much as the ocean heals and changes, it also keeps a careful record of everything that happens within it. The deep trenches of the world's oceans, where sunlight barely reaches, hide remnants of ancient species. fossils that rest in the mud like forgotten whispers. In places like the Mariana Trench, which plunges down deeper than Mount Everest's peak, life takes on an eerie silence. Creatures here have adapted in ways we could never have imagined, evolving to survive in the crushing pressure and near complete darkness of the deep. Yet, these creatures are connected to the ancient world, descendants of the first life forms to rise from the primordial oceans and to the more familiar beings that evolved into today's sea creatures. But the ocean is not only a place of deep history, it is a place of constant motion, always shifting, reshaping and renewing. The surface waters churn with storms and currents, moving nutrients across vast distances. Where there was once barren seafloor, new ecosystems spring to life. Hydrothermal vents, places where superheated water flows from the Earth's crust, support entire communities of organisms. These vents, like undersea oases, are stark reminders that life can persist in the most unexpected places. Creatures like tube worms, with their bright red plumes, and shrimp that thrive on chemicals rather than sunlight, show that life on Earth is not limited to the surface but can flourish in the deepest, darkest parts of the world. And in this ever-changing, ever-evolving ocean, one thing remains constant: the memory of the impact that forever altered life on Earth. The asteroid that struck millions of years ago did more than cause immediate chaos. It left a legacy of change that ripples through the ocean's currents. The creatures that survived adapted, evolved, and filled the spaces left behind by the giants. The food chains that had once been dominated by the mighty dinosaurs were replaced by new rhythms, new balances. The survivors of that extinction event did not simply endure. They became the architects of the modern world, evolving into the species we see today, from the smallest plankton to the great blue whales that glide gracefully through the open seas. The ocean holds these lessons in its depths, lessons about the fragility of life and the power of resilience. It teaches us that while extinction is an undeniable part of life's story, so too is rebirth. For when one chapter closes, another opens, sometimes in ways we cannot predict or even fully understand. The ocean is a place of both destruction and creation, of endings and beginnings. It mirrors the cycle of life on Earth, a reminder that even in the face of catastrophe, life finds a way to persist, to adapt, to evolve. We see this evolution in the creatures of the sea. Dolphins, with their intelligence and social structures, have become the playful cousins of the ancient cetaceans that first returned to the ocean after the extinction. Turtles, with their ancient shells and slow, deliberate movements, continue the path of the marine reptiles that once ruled the seas. Sharks, unchanged for millions of years, remain the ocean's apex predators, their sleek bodies gliding through the water like living fossils. And beneath the surface, the coral reefs, though threatened by human activity, still thrive, teeming with life. They are the ocean's rainforests, the cradle for millions of species, a place where life constantly evolves in response to the shifting tides of time. The ocean, in all its complexity, is the most profound reminder we have of time's passage. Its waves lap at the shores of today, while carrying with them the ancient memories of yesterday. The ash that once fell from the sky, the dust that clouded the world, has long since settled. But its legacy remains, woven into the very fabric of the Earth's oceans. And as the world changes again, as the planet faces new challenges, the ocean will continue to carry the lessons of the past, reminding us that no matter how dark the sky may grow, no matter how heavy the ash, the Earth always finds a way to heal, to renew, and to begin again. And in the face of all this change, the ocean remains deep, vast, and enduring. It is a place of mystery, of awe, and of quiet wisdom. It holds the past in its depths, yet constantly moves forward, embracing the future in ways we cannot always see. It tells us that life, like water, always flows forward, adapting to the shape of the land, to the rhythms of time. And in this great eternal flow, the story of Earth continues, written not in ink,